Well, President Trump faces new pressure from business leaders and prominent Republicans to accept Joe Biden as president-elect, while Trump's long-shot legal challenges get struck down in court. On the phone now to discuss is Bloomberg's Josh Wingrove in Washington, D.C. Josh, who's now telling the president to face the facts and accept defeat?
Well, slowly climbing up the ladder in terms of rank, but yeah, one of the big names, Stephen Schwarzman, today, that of course is one of is Trump's biggest supporter on Wall Street, the CEO of Blackstone Group, and so he is sort of joined by a different group of business leaders, as well as a separate group of national security officials, including former governor of Pennsylvania and that kind of thing. All of them are sort of saying variously, it's time to start the transition. Some of them are going further and saying Biden has won. But, what they can all agree on, it seems right now, is it's time to start a transition to at least give Biden a look under the hood. But it's stopping at, leadership levels. For instance, Mitch McConnell is sort of most prominent among the Republican officials who have not objected so far to what is becoming sort of an increasingly long shot, slapdash series of legal challenges by the Trump camp.
Right. We did see some Senate Republicans over the weekend start to, in different ways, say it was time for the president to move on. I think perhaps most prominently, we saw Pennsylvania GOP Senator Pat Toomey, who Trump then criticized, of course, on Twitter in response. But I do wonder, Josh, at what point, what will it take for other Republicans to acknowledge this, do you think?
Well, I mean, the Senate runoffs are hanging over everything. So I think people are scared of it. Also hanging over everything is that Trump clearly wants some kind of role in the party going forward. You can't really afford to cross him. If you do, you're lining yourself up for a primary challenge. In fact, the governor of Ohio is one of the folks that has said the obvious, which is that based on the data we have now, Joe Biden won. And for that, he's a Republican governor, and for that, Trump is now openly stoking a primary challenge against him. So people are scared to sort of speak out. I think it seems in the last few days we've had a bit of a break of the dam a little bit, particularly in the aftermath of that lengthy press conference that Trump's legal trio had on Thursday, where they really did not provide anything in terms of new widespread evidence that would lead this to change the election in not one but several states to allow Trump to hold on to power. That seems to have sort of exhausted people's patience. And one of those members was disavowed by the Trump camp yesterday, Sidney Powell. The other two lawyers, Rudy Giuliani and Jenna Ellis, said that Powell isn't representing Trump's campaign or Trump himself. So, it's a moving target, but it seems to be right now a minority group, but a growing one, of Republicans saying that Trump should at least start the transition to give Biden a chance to get, classified briefings, that kind of thing, or go further and just simply concede.
Yeah, Josh, I wonder, too, what kind of environment this sets up for President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris to take the White House. What does it look like to them if you have Republican lawmakers even refusing at this point to acknowledge that they won? What does that portend for how they move legislation through Congress?
I wonder whether it should portend that Joe Biden's view of Washington might be a little naive. He believes in bipartisanship. He believes that he can find cooperation in Congress, even if Republicans hold the Senate majority. There are a lot of Democrats who are skeptical of that. And what the last 3 weeks tell us is that, in or out, whether he's running or not, Donald Trump will continue to carry a big stick for Republican Party officials and senators and members of Congress who will face or who at least believe right now that they will face consequences for running afoul of Trump. And that will, I think, impact Biden's ability to sort of, reach bipartisan consensus, which he'll need on, of course, everything, including naming his own cabinet to actually passing legislation. So we'll see. But I think that Trump's hold on the party might not be as strong as it was before the election, but it's still very strong and certainly stronger than anyone else's. And
Josh, forgive me, because this is a drum I've been beating for weeks now, but I just still have trouble seeing the strategy here, because if we learned anything from the election is that Republicans actually gained support in the Senate and in the House.
Yes.
And what we saw was at least a rejection of President Trump, but some sort of further embrace, at least in the House, of Republican policies. So it does seem like the numbers are telling us, And the data is telling us that voters are approving of Republicans, but not of President Trump. So I just wonder why Republicans continue to hitch their wagon to this guy that voters rejected.
I think a lot of Republicans will marvel, even ones that don't particularly like the president, at his ability to drive people to the polls. When he is on the ballot, they see surges in turnout. A lot of Republicans think that they couldn't have gotten elected without Donald Trump. It is a bit weird that more Republicans aren't willing to sort of take the wins that are there in terms of no one expected really them to do as well in the House as they did. It was very much a toss-up as to whether they hold the Senate, and pending those runoffs, it looks, in my view, likely that they probably still will hold the Senate. So they've cut down Pelosi's majority, and they've held the line in the Senate. That's something to build off of. So you're totally right. I'm surprised it's not talked about more, and I think we've seen some sort of subtly suggest that as almost a path out for the president, a way for him to sort of change his tune and declare wins a little bit rather than the path he's on, which is alleging this wide-scale fraud. I mean, if the election was illegitimate, then so too were the gains in the House by the Republican Party in some ways. So it's a bit of a mixed message.
It is a very mixed message. That's a very good way of putting it. Josh, last night we heard reports that Republicans may block many of Biden's cabinet picks. You said that the Washington that Biden was used to and had been in for more than 45 years has changed significantly, and I would certainly agree with that. What is Biden's strategy for this, and how is he going to get his cabinet approved if there is that Republican majority?
Well, I mean, we're going to know a lot more about his cabinet picks this time tomorrow. They're starting to come out, including what looks to be his Homeland Security Secretary of State. He seems to be just basically relying on resumes so far. People that they could at least get past with this sort of 3 or 4 Republican senators who are a little more independent, Mitt Romney, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, Ben Sasse, that kind of group. So we'll see, I guess, what happens. But I think Biden will find some, limited success or reasonable success in terms of getting at least the frame of a cabinet appointed fairly quickly. It'll be legislation and, the judicial appointments that I think all signs are that is just going to trickle along. McConnell will keep it probably moving just long enough that no one can accuse him of flatly stalling it. But I think Joe Biden's hopes for big legislative pushes in Congress in the next 2 years, we just don't know. And then we also don't know what's going to happen in 2022. Does Donald Trump not being on the ballot help or hurt Republicans? Is it a referendum on Biden? Too early to say.
Yeah, a lot of unknowns in the next couple of years, and thankfully we have you and the team in D.C. to keep us updated with all of them. Bloomberg's Josh Wingrove in Washington, thanks as always for your time. It's good to chat with you.
Thank you.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quick Take now for insight in an instant.